Good evening, good Yontov. As we were figuring out how to label these high holidays, we considered a number of themes that ended up not working out. Get a little closer. Joy is infectious. Holidays that leave you breathless. I've got a fever for Judaism. Reach out and touch someone. Be positive today. I'm glad we settled on at home together. It really reflects the theme of the last 6 months for so many of us. A lot of things that used to happen elsewhere, an awful lot of what has been happening at home. And tonight I want to explore with you what it means to be Jewish at home and away, and what it means to really bring Judaism home. Because what's funny is that even though the pandemic has meant we spend a lot less time actually visiting other people's homes, ironically, we get a view into their homes and their home environments that is far beyond what we would normally expect, what they would ever let us see. Normally, your first visit to someone's home, you're seeing the living room, the dining room, the deck, the den. You're not given access to the rooms where all the clutter lives, the dishes, the basement office. You don't go into the master bedroom. But with the pandemic, we have ended up giving access into the parts of our homes, the parts of our lives that would normally be private. Our children and pets visit our business meetings. The boundaries between public and private have blurred. Now, it's not just us normal people, it's celebrities and journalists and politicians as well. There's a great Twitter feed called Room Raider, created by a political fundraiser named Claude Taylor and his fiancée, Jessie. They watch all of these TV interviews on Zoom, and they comment on what is going on behind the person on the screen. They get points for cleanliness, for the depth of field in the room, for colors, for plants, and then there's a final rating on a scale of 1 to 10. And by the way, it's not just the things in your house, it's the people. You find out who else is at home. There was a famous incident where there was a news anchor in Spain whose girlfriend was walking through the back of the shot quite unclothed. And the way our basement is set up at home, on the rare occasions when I do leave my office, Wendy's coworkers get a sight that is generally involving pants, but is far less enchanting. Now, of course, today you can try to cover over all of that. You can have these backgrounds on Zoom that make it seem like you're on the beach, in outer space, looking at the Golden Gate Bridge, or with a special visitor, or perhaps even in a neater version of your own office. I see we didn't quite have the special effects budget I was hoping for. By the way, for at least some of the parents watching right now, I don't know if you know this or not, but your child has created a Zoom background that includes himself looking very intently at the screen, and changed their screen name to so-and-so is connecting to audio, 3 dots. They can wander out of frame for 40 minutes, and their teacher has no idea. As we were planning these holidays together at home, I was concerned about something. We knew that there would be over 1,000 households participating, and there was no way we could have everyone on screen. And I was sure that being seen by the community would be perceived as a huge honor. I was nervous that we only had a few hundred slots to be rationed off. And I was wrong. For some of the time slots, the only one who signed up was my mom. A lot of people said, I don't want to commit. I don't want to get dressed up. I don't want to have my home on display. Sensitivity to the privacy of our home is something that goes way back in our tradition. When we are kids, we learn that song, Ma tovu ohalecha Yaakov mishkena. How beautiful are your tents, O Jacob. Those words were actually written by Balaam, a prophet who was hired to curse the Jewish people. And you have to ask, when Balaam is praising us, what's so great about tents? I mean, I know they're all the rage now for every kind of outdoor activity. But the answer given in the Talmud is fascinating. In the Talmud Bava Batra, the answer is given that in the encampment in the wilderness, the Israelites were packed very close together. And yet, they oriented the openings of their tents so that one did not look at one another, so that each one had privacy, even in that very dense configuration. If you will, they turned off their desert cameras. Now, if you're still singing Ma Tovu in your head, you may be remembering that it is a song that we sing not when we come home, not to celebrate the Jewish house, but actually we sing it when we enter the synagogue. Because elsewhere in the Talmud, in Sanhedrin, the same phrase is associated with synagogues and houses of study. And over the last centuries, there has actually been a pendulum that has swung back and forth, between home and synagogue, between individual and communal spaces as the focus for Jewish practice. Now, the words of the Shema that we said tonight, the most basic prayer of our tradition, talk about the idea of being home and away. We talk about being Jewish, about loving God, whether we are dwelling in our home or we are on a journey, whether you're in your house or you are out. Either way, you are connecting to God. This year, of course, we've seen the swing on that pendulum, home and away, go to its extreme. But I was fortunate to get a little bit of a head start thinking about that transition. I was chosen this past year as a LEAP Fellow, one of about a dozen rabbis who spent time at the University of Pennsylvania to talk with scholars of Jewish studies across disciplines about the meaning of the Jewish home. We learned about everything from Canaanite burial practices to the architecture of Israeli apartments to the origins of home libraries to innovative ritual objects. And I'm grateful to have the chance to have those ideas inform where we have gotten to today. Because as you can imagine, for centuries there was a division of labor, if you will, between the Jewish home and the out there. If you were going to study, books were very expensive. So having a home library was really unusual. To learn, you went to the Beit Midrash, the house of study. If you were to engage in prayer, you needed a minyan. And you might not have known all the prayers on your own anyway. So you went to the synagogue where there was a prayer book or the words of the prayers were actually written on the wall so you could look up and follow. But home mattered a lot. Home was where Shabbat happened. Home was where Seder happened. Home was where pretty much anything that women did happened. Home was where daily meals were taken, kosher food, with blessings before and after. But on the other hand, your Judaism actually happened everywhere. Wherever you went, you were wearing clothing that marked you as a Jew. Wherever you went, you were speaking a language that identified you as a Jew. It affected what you ate and drank at the local tavern. It affected how you interacted with your neighbors. It affected your choice of dwelling place and career. You couldn't get away from it. By default, we were Jews home and away. Then, about 250 years ago, this thing called the Enlightenment hit. Jews started wondering, maybe if we start looking and talking and acting like everybody else, maybe they won't hate us so much. Maybe we can just kind of blend in. And so in 1866, there was a Russian Jewish poet, Yud Gordon, who summarized this approach when he said, although he didn't say it in English, be a Jew at home and a man in the street. Be a Jew at home, but not out there. Be like everybody else. So religious observance was something to be relegated to the home, to be hidden away there. Being Jewish in public, out in the open, was to be avoided. Yes, have your menorah, but if the Cossacks come by, put up a generic seasonal background. Why mark yourself as different by abstaining from the foods that other people eat, by wearing different clothes, by going to different schools? Why sacrifice your economic well-being by staying home on the Sabbath when everyone else is working. Best, Gordon said, leave that religious life a little bit behind. And if you have to, even if you were going to synagogue, said some, couldn't the synagogue blend into the neighborhood a little bit better? Couldn't the building and the worship look a little bit more like the church down the street? Move the bima up front, put in an organ, pray in the same language that everyone else is praying in. And so the battle lines were drawn in European Jewry. There were the Jews who wanted to blend in, and there were the Jews who wanted to stand out. And in the end, by the way, it didn't matter. Because there were those who hated us despite the fact that we tried to blend in, and there were those who hated us because we stood aside. The Nazis decimated the body of Jewish Europe, and what was left, the communists, came for their souls. It didn't matter whether you were Jewish home or away. But the pendulum swung differently here in America. American Jews, by and large, are proud to wear their Judaism on their sleeves. That's what all the surveys said. We have embraced what we would call public square Judaism. You know, I was on a cruise this past winter, and I was looking for a quiet getaway. So somehow I ended up on a boat with 70 members of the Atlanta Jewish community, my rabbinical school roommate, and my in-laws. We actually had planned to be with my in-laws. But it didn't start out that way. You know, we have a policy that I don't leave the synagogue on Shabbat to go and do an away game, bar or bat mitzvah. But if you happen to book a cruise on the same ship that my in-laws have already booked us on, and then the cruise ship breaks down and you have to stop in Puerto Rico instead of St. Thomas, I guess you're in luck. Rabbi Heller will do your bar mitzvah wherever you are. It was assumed on this ship that there would be a candle lighting, a Hanukkah candle lighting, because it was Hanukkah, that there would be on Friday night Jewish services. And in fact, this cruise was so Jewish, there was not only the main service, there was a breakaway service from the main service. I got drafted to run the breakaway. As American Jews, we are very comfortable being Jews away. In fact, so many people I know who go weeks without going to synagogue will call me and say, I'm going to thus and such city in Europe. I'm going to be in Barcelona. I'm going to be in Rome. I'm going to be in Warsaw. Please give me a letter so I can go to synagogue there. I'm like, you might need a letter to come to synagogue here. But we wear our faith on our sleeves. And we are happy to identify whatever we do, we say that it is part of our Jewish identity. When we march as Jews for. When we march against, we march as Jews against. Jews for this candidate, Jews for that candidate. Jews for this cause, and Jews for that cause. And perhaps it's a sermon for another time, but I have to note that in some ways, we face the same conundrum on a much smaller scale that was faced by the Jews of Europe. I am often a witness to Jews of various persuasions disputing on the place where all conflicts are peacefully resolved, Facebook, talking about the different flavors of anti-Semitism that we face today. And I've spoken about it in the past. I spoke about it on Rosh Hashanah a few years ago. There's the anti-Semitism of the extreme left, of those who hate us because we're unique, because we're not like anyone else, because we're proud of who we are as a nation, who hate us because we are associated with Israel. And then there's the anti-Semitism of the extreme right, the folks who hate us because they believe that people should be different, that some are superior to others. And if we just kept to ourselves and maybe went back to Israel, it would be okay. And different segments of our community align with one extreme or the other. It's very easy to attack the anti-Semites on the other guy's side and ignore the ones in your own backyard. Oh, they're a fringe, they don't count, nobody's paying attention to them. But those guys, deciding which flavor you like is kind of like expressing a preference for one kind of cancer over another. So our country is heading towards a fall that will be rougher than anything we've seen in a long time. That seems to be the only thing that everyone can agree on. And what I will tell you is that when that day comes, there will be Jews in the streets on both sides of the barricades, claiming that they represent what it truly means to be Jewish. But there's actually some good news, which is as much hate and racism and animosity as there is out there, for the most part, it's actually weirdly not about us. There are folks who might be trying to put it on the agenda of one movement or another, but we're not really what the fight is about. We have to pay attention because that knock on the door might someday be for us, but at the moment, it's for other people. This past week, we mourned the loss of the Supreme Court Justice Ruth Bader Ginsburg, just as Rosh Hashanah started. And I spoke on Rosh Hashanah morning about what made her remarkable, the doors she opened. And a number of people asked, why didn't you talk about Ruth Bader Ginsburg? My response is, why aren't you there before 10:30? But I spoke about the way that her career reflected her Jewish values, and whether you agreed with every one of her rulings or not, one has to agree that it is a loss for our people and our country. And the debate over her replacement is another log on the fire that may set alight our nation's house. But in the midst of this, and in what would normally in no way be good news, there actually is a sign of hope, a reminder of the unique position of Jews in America in history, which is that she was the first woman, but also the first Jew to lie in state in the U.S. Capitol. There is a respect for Jews in this country that we have never seen before. And by the way, Justice Ginsburg lying in state, actually provoked tremendous controversy. Jews put down their BLTs, their bagels with lox and tomato, to ask, but Jewish tradition says that you are supposed to bury quickly. How did they keep her over through the week? After all, you're supposed to bury the same day as soon as you can. You're not supposed to embalm. And actually, even in our law codes, it says that you're allowed to delay burial for the dignity of the deceased, to allow relatives to arrive, to allow for word to spread, for honor to be given to those who have passed. A discussion of Jewish mourning practices was moved into the public square. People actually cared about how we observed. Rabbis offered words of eulogy in the most important buildings in our country. But that's only half the sermon, actually about 2/3. I want to talk tonight about being a Jew not only away, but also at home, because I think that's the challenge that we face as American Jews. Being a Jew at home is harder than it looks. The problem is that Judaism became something that we in America handed over to institutions. We have this tremendous infrastructure: synagogue, JCC, Jewish school, Jewish camp. And that meant that Judaism is something that happened Belachtecha b'derech, as you were passing on your way somewhere else. I talk to kids and they'll say, Havdalah is my favorite ritual. Well, okay, so when do you do it? Well, I only do it at camp, because don't you need a lake to do Havdalah? Education. There are schools that do a tremendous job of Jewish education under tremendously trying circumstances. But do we bring it home? After all, I'm Jewish 5 days a week at school. Do I really need to do it here too? And so our very worthwhile investment in these institutions has come at a cost, in that it has migrated our Judaism out of our homes. And so I pose the question to you, and there has never been a better year to ask this question, because that's where you are. Look around right now. What makes your home, you, a Jewish home? What makes your home? Look around a Jewish home. You can even do like a little scavenger hunt. I'll wait. Is there a mezuzah on the door of your house? Are there Jewish ritual objects, Shabbat candles, a Kiddush cup, a challah board, Havdalah set, a tzedakah box, a Seder plate, a Hanukkah menorah? Is there a yahrzeit candle burning right now? Do you have a Jewish calendar? Jewish calendar, 5780, barely used. You have that drawer full of kippot from every bar mitzvah you ever went to. What about Jewish books? All right, Mom, I know you win. It doesn't have to be the Talmud, the complete works of Maimonides. I'm talking about the basics. When we went into lockdown, it was amazing to me how many people who had a prayer book in their home, who had a Bible in their home. You know what? If you don't have a Bible in your home, then next time you go to a hotel, they have one there, and you only need to take the first half. What about a Jewish how-to book? You could make your own Haggadah. What about a work of Jewish fiction? What about that Jewish baby name book you borrowed from me and then you got busy and never returned? I have gone through like 50 of those. Sometimes I get them back at the bat mitzvah. Think about this. In your home, what are the things that you treasure most proudly? What are the things that you display prominently? Maybe it's art that you brought back from Europe or New Mexico or the Far East. What is there in your home from Sfat, from Jerusalem? Is there something with Hebrew on it? Maybe it's an Israeli Coke can from the plane, or maybe it's a ketubah. What's in your pantry, your fridge, your freezer? What isn't? You know, maybe you observe in that traditional way, you have two sets of dishes. Or then there's Baltimore kosher, where you have milk, dairy, and crab. What about matzah, which you can never find right before Passover, but right now all the supermarkets have it displayed proudly for all your Yom Kippur meals? Here's the thing. All these things are in your house or not. But think about what makes your house a home. A house is about a structure and the stuff in it. A home is the people and what they do. So think about look around, the photos. What are the events that you have picture of? Is it just winning the big softball game? Is it the bar and bat mitzvah? Is it the wedding? You know, our definition of Jewish family has changed. But who are the people who walk through your Zoom background? And what do you do there? And it may sound laughable. Do you make time to be at home? You know, when my wife was growing up, one of the things for which I give my in-laws tremendous credit is they had a rule. You had to be home, or you had to be at grandma's for Shabbat dinner. Then you could go out. But Shabbat dinner was sacred. Maybe it's a prayer before eating. You know, it used to be really hard to set aside time for study at home because it was self-guided and getting the right books. You know, this year I'm teaching a course on the Cairo Geniza. Books were rare. They were used and used and used until they wore out. And even then, you didn't throw them away. And so we found the storehouse of every book that wasn't thrown away for an entire community. We've learned tremendous things about Jewish history, what it means to be Jewish. It used to be you had to schlep somewhere to learn about those things. Well, guess what? This year, you can just log in and I'll schmooze at you from my house to yours. You can set aside time for study in your home. But more than that, anything can be a ritual object. Right now, your computer, your TV, your screen is a ritual object in a way that no one ever imagined before. Your phone can be a ritual object if you use it to call someone who is sick, if you use it to comfort a mourner. Your dining room table is a ritual object. One of the most basic questions about today, Yom Kippur, the Day of Atonement, is this. In ancient times, atonement happened because you brought offerings in the temple. In the absence of the altar, with the altar destroyed, how do you find holiness and atonement? And in the Talmud, there's another answer given. There is an alternative provided. Rabbi Yochanan and Reish Lakish explain, at the time when the temple stood, the altar and its offerings made atonement for a person. Now our table makes atonement. So some of the rituals of the Shabbat dinner table, we wash our hands, how we handle the knife, putting the salt on the challah, those all make the Jewish table sacred because they remind us of what happened in the ancient table, in the ancient temple. Rashi, though, the classic commentator, says something amazing. He says, a person's table makes atonement for him by means of welcoming guests, hachnasat orchim. When you welcome people into your home, when you share the Judaism in your home with others, the food on your table, that is what makes your home. That's what makes you holy. That's what undoes the harm in your life. So tonight I've put a huge emphasis on being Jewish in your home, on filling it with ritual objects, with prayer, with study, with hospitality, with meaning, with love. But we're here on Kol Nidre evening, and I was told that I'm supposed to be promoting the synagogue. Aren't I talking myself out of a job in some way? Well, here's the thing. Even when the balance was more towards the synagogue than home, the synagogue was not always where it was happening. But the truth is, and we didn't really think about it that way, the synagogue has always offered two ways to approach God: dine in and take out. You know, when I talk to kids about the synagogue and what the synagogue is, sometimes they'll say to me, what happens in that place? They'll say, the rabbi lives there. And that's actually kind of true. But you know what? They'll also say, God lives there. And that's also true because God lives everywhere. But what would it take? What would be involved in having God come to live in your house? To have the book that you might encounter here in this room come and also have a treasured spot on your shelf? What would it mean to have all the rituals that you learn here come and bring meaning to holy moments for your family and friends? What would it mean to have the people who you meet, the community you create through the synagogue, carry through for sacred moments around your dinner table or theirs? To have lessons of charity that you learn here carry through to your support of worthy causes everywhere. What would it mean to have the synagogue be a place that helps you be Jewish away and at home? As I come to the end of my remarks tonight, I realize, as I talk about Judaism at home and away, that I've left off an important definition. I've been pretty clear about what away means. You know, is away like the Shema, B'lechtecha b'derech, when you were on your journey? Is it like what Yud Lamed Gordon said, that the away is when you're out in the street in the public sphere? Or like Balaam said, as quoted in the Talmud, that being away, that the tent is the tent of the synagogue. A lot of ways to define away. But what does it mean to be at home? What does it mean to be in a Jewish home? Is home a place of safety? Well, we hope so, but our cousins and our ancestors know that sometimes they learned the hard way that sometimes a bar on the front door was not strong enough to keep out the evils of the world. Others have suggested that home is where we can be vulnerable. That home is where we can let down our guard. That home is where we can be who we truly are. Tell that to the people at Room Raider. Tell that to the people who invented the Zoom background. Everyone who has their camera off right now. We are living in a time where we feel like we can never go with appearances, where we can never let down our pretenses. We can never take off our masks, even at home, metaphorically speaking, because wherever we go, wherever we are, we feel judged. The poet Robert Frost offers another definition. Robert Frost said, "Home is the place where, when you go there, they have to take you in." When you go there, they have to take you in. Your house is hopefully that place. And maybe this place is too. You know, Judaism, Jewish community is meant to make you feel that you have a place, whether it's the fourth table on the left in the social hall or the fifth window down on the screen. It's the place where you always have a place. When times are uncertain, when we may end up being a part of history, and you know what? Being a part of history is not always a good thing. Sometimes it's better to be in a footnote than to be in the main text of the history book. You know, we are in a world, a new world is being born, I said on Rosh Hashanah. Sometimes when something is being born, you would rather have an epidural and wake up when it is all over. But those are the times when the synagogue matters most. When having God with you wherever you are, whether you're away or at home, matters most. Whether you're at home or away, this is the time when having God with you is so important. We're in the midst of a time when the pendulum has swung and it's harder to be away and it's easier to be at home. Whether it's the bag that you received at your doorstep or the stream that you're watching right now, B'nai Torah delivers. Curbside. We will help you bring God home. If you let it, your home can be a place where God lives. Let us help so that you and God can be at home together. Good Yontif.